My name is Maya Flores. I'm 28, a part-time art teacher in Los Angeles. But in my family's eyes, I'm a disgrace, just the shadow of my younger brother, Leo, the designated genius. They just gambled away our childhood home, mortgaging it to fund his sculpture exhibition. It bombed spectacularly, and now the foreclosure notice from Sterling Financial has arrived. My parents are broken, and Leo is screaming about how the world is conspiring to crush his talent. They came to me, crying, begging for help from the daughter they've always treated with shame. But here's the secret they never saw coming. I am Uno, the anonymous creator of the webtoon Ethereum, which just sold for millions. And the most vicious twist of all, the bank that's about to throw them onto the street is a subsidiary of the very studio that bought my work. Their entire debt now belongs to me. They thought I was a failure, but they're about to learn a bitter lesson. The daughter they treated like trash now holds the power to either shatter their world or be their only salvation. The smell of turpentine and cheap, waxy crayons is the scent of my real life. It clings to my clothes and hides under my fingernails. I teach art to restless 6 to 10-year-olds in a cramped, sun-drenched studio in a quiet corner of Los Angeles. I show them how to see the world not just as it is, but as it could be, a riot of color and shape. Today, a little girl named Lily, with pigtails perpetually askew, painted a purple giraffe eating a rainbow. Her joy was so pure, so explosive, it felt more valuable than any masterpiece hanging in the Getty. I praised her, taped the drawing to our wall of wonders, and for a moment I was just Maya Flores, the part-time art teacher who makes just enough to cover her rent and ramen noodle budget. It's a quiet life, a small life, and it's the life my family thinks is my only one. My phone buzzed as I was cleaning the brushes, the insistent vibration a stark contrast to the sleepy afternoon. It was my mother, Alina. I could practically hear her beaming smile through the phone. Maya, Mija. You will not believe the news. I leaned against the sink, already knowing the news would be about one person, and it wasn't me. What is it, Mom? Leo, his exhibition, it's happening, a real gallery downtown. The curator called him a visionary, a once-in-a-generation talent. I closed my eyes. Leo, my younger brother, the family's designated genius. His art consisted of twisted metal and found objects, hulking, aggressive sculptures that took up our parents' entire backyard and garage. He spoke of them in hushed, reverent tones, using words like deconstruction, post-industrial ennui, and the spatial dialogue between object and absence. Most people just saw a pile of junk. My family saw the next Picasso. That's amazing, Mom. I'm happy for him. The words felt like ash in my mouth. Happy, Mija, this is everything. This is what we've been working for. Your father and I are so proud. Listen, we're having a celebratory dinner tonight. Aunt Sophia is coming. You have to be here. Wear that nice blue dress, okay? Look presentable. Look presentable. The unspoken second half of that sentence hung in the air. Try not to look like a struggling art teacher for once. I'll be there, Mom. I hung up and stared at my reflection in the small, cracked mirror above the sink. Faint smudges of blue paint dotted my cheek. My hair was pulled back in a messy bun that had given up hours ago. Presentable. Right. Later that night, I walked into the house I grew up in. The familiar scent of my mother's cooking, garlic, oregano, slow-simmered love, was overlaid with the acrid smell of welding fumes from the garage. Leo's latest creation, a monstrous thing of rusted gears and bent rebar titled Urban Decay 7, loomed over the living room sofa like a metal predator. My father, Ricardo, a man whose quiet worries were etched into the lines around his eyes, was trying to hang fairy lights on it. It was a pathetic attempt to make the monstrosity look festive. Maya. You're here, my mother enveloped me in a hug that was both loving and critically assessing. Her eyes scanned my simple blue dress. You look nice, sweetie. Leo was holding court in the center of the room, a glass of expensive wine in his hand. He was 26, with a carefully cultivated artist's scruff and a black turtleneck. He looked like a caricature of a genius. It's not about the object itself, he was explaining to our Aunt Sophia, a woman who had no time for nonsense. It's about the negative space, the void it creates. That's where the true art lies. Aunt Sophia, a pragmatic accountant with a gaze that could audit your soul, took a slow sip of her own wine. The void, huh? Does the void pay the bills, Leo? My mother shot her a withering glare. Sophia, please, not tonight. This is a celebration of Leo's vision. I'm just asking a practical question, Alina, Sophia retorted, unruffled. Vision is wonderful, but rent is due on the 1st. The money will come, Leo said with an airy wave of his hand. Once the world sees my work, the patrons will follow. This exhibition is the key. It will change everything. My father finally managed to get the lights working. They flickered weakly against the rust. "It's a big investment, but we believe in our son," he said, though his voice lacked the booming confidence of my mother. He looked tired, more tired than usual. Dinner was a masterclass in the Flores family dynamic. Every conversation orbited Leo. His process, his genius, the profound meaning behind a sculpture made from 3 broken lawnmowers. I tried to talk about Lily and her purple giraffe. "That's sweet, honey," my mother said, patting my hand before turning back to Leo. "So, tell us again what the gallery owner said about your use of texture." I felt myself shrinking, becoming invisible at my own family's table. They loved me, I knew they did, but they didn't see me. They saw the quiet, reliable, slightly disappointing older sister, the one with the nice little hobby teaching kids, while Leo was destined for greatness. They had no idea about my other life, the one that began after midnight, when the city was asleep and I was wide awake. In that life, I wasn't Maya Flores. I was Uno. As Uno, I was the creator of Ethereum, the most popular webtoon on the planet. It was a sprawling sci-fi epic about a team of outcast heroes fighting a galactic empire. It had millions of devoted readers every week, a mountain of merchandise, and had recently been the subject of a fierce bidding war between 3 major Hollywood studios. Last month, I had signed the deal. A deal so massive, the advance alone could have bought my parents' house 10 times over. No one knew. Not my family, not my friends, except for one. My agent and best friend, Jessica. She was the only one who knew that the quiet art teacher was also a creative powerhouse with a multi-million-dollar empire at her fingertips. "So," my father said, clearing his throat and interrupting my thoughts. He looked at my mother, a silent, nervous exchange passing between them. "About the exhibition, son, there are costs, the gallery fee, the transportation for the pieces, the insurance. We've taken care of it," my mother announced, her chin held high. "Your father and I believe that you can't put a price on genius. We want Leo to have everything he needs to succeed." Aunt Sophia put her fork down. "Elena, what did you do?" My father wouldn't meet her eyes. "We took out a second mortgage on the house. It's just a loan. Once Leo sells a few pieces, we'll pay it back, no problem." A cold dread washed over me, so intense it was hard to breathe. The house. The place of every childhood memory, every Christmas morning, every scraped knee. They had gambled it all on Leo, on his piles of twisted metal. I looked at my brother. He wasn't even listening. He was staring at his own reflection in the darkened dining room window, a small, self-satisfied smile on his face. He simply accepted their sacrifice as his due, the tribute owed to a king. I excused myself from the table, my heart pounding a sick rhythm against my ribs. In my old bedroom, I pulled out my phone and dialed Jessica. "Hey, you," her cheerful voice answered. "Don't tell me you're working. The script consultant for the movie is freaking out because he thinks the main character's plasma rifle shouldn't be blue. He wants red. Can you believe it? We're paying this guy $500,000 to argue about color palettes." "Jess," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "They did it. They mortgaged the house again." The humor vanished from her voice. "What? Maya, no, tell me you're kidding. For the exhibition, for his junk collection? They called it an investment." I could hear her sigh, a long, frustrated sound. "An investment in what? Delusion? Maya, this is insane. Your parents are going to lose everything. You have to do something." "What can I do?" I asked, sinking onto my childhood bed. "If I offer them money, they'll ask where it came from. If I tell them the truth, it will break them. Their whole world is built around Leo the genius and Maya the nobody. What happens when they find out the nobody is the one holding all the cards?" "Maybe their world needs to be broken a little," Jessica said softly. "They can't keep doing this to you or to themselves." We talked for a few more minutes. She told me the studio, Titan Forge Media, was ecstatic. They wanted to fly me out for a private meeting with the director and production designer. They were calling Uno the next great cinematic universe. A universe I had built alone, in the dark, while my family was busy polishing the pedestal for their golden child. After I hung up, I sat there for a long time, the muffled sounds of celebration drifting up from downstairs. They were toasting to the future, to Leo's inevitable, glorious success. They were all so busy staring at a future that would never come, they couldn't see the disaster right in front of them. They couldn't see that the foundation of their world wasn't just cracked, it was about to shatter. And I was the only one who felt the tremors. I went back downstairs, forced a smile, and raised my glass. "To Leo," I said, my voice sounding hollow even to my own ears. And in the silence of my own heart, I added, "And may we all survive what comes next." The week leading up to the exhibition was a frantic blur of misplaced optimism. My parents emptied what was left of their savings to rent a flatbed truck to transport Leo's sculptures. I watched from the kitchen window as my father, his back already aching, struggled to secure a piece called Industrial Scream with fraying ropes. He had lost weight. The stress was physically consuming him. "Isn't it magnificent, Maya?" my mother said, coming to stand beside me. She was looking at the sculpture, but she was really looking at her son, who was directing the proceedings like a general commanding an army. "Even on the back of a truck, it has such presence." "It's big, Mom, that's for sure," I said, my voice carefully neutral. She sighed, a familiar sound of faint disappointment. "You just don't see it." "You have a good heart, Mija, but you lack the artistic soul. It's all right. Not everyone can be a visionary." I spent that Saturday helping them at the gallery. The space was stark white and minimalist, which only served to make Leo's rusty creations look more like junkyard refuse. The gallery owner, a man named Damien with a pencil-thin mustache and an assortment of silk scarves, floated around, speaking in breathless superlatives. "The raw power, the untamed energy," he exclaimed, gesturing at a sculpture made from a mangled shopping cart. "Leo, my boy, you are not just making art, you are challenging the very definition of aesthetics." My father, writing a check for the gallery's curation fee, didn't look convinced. "So you think this will sell, Damien?" "Sell?" Damien chuckled as if the question were absurdly pedestrian. "Ricardo, we are not selling objects. We are placing cultural artifacts into the hands of discerning collectors. The sales will be monumental." He clapped Leo on the shoulder. "The art world is buzzing. I've invited Genevieve Croft." My blood ran cold. Genevieve Croft wasn't just a critic, she was an executioner. Her reviews in the LA Arts Chronicle could make or break a career overnight. She was notoriously sharp, witty, and had a deep-seated hatred for anything she deemed pretentious. Inviting her wasn't a buzz, it was a death sentence. "Isn't she a bit harsh?" I asked, unable to stop myself. Leo scoffed. "She's brilliant, she'll understand my work. Real recognizes real." My phone vibrated in my pocket, a lifeline. I stepped outside into the alley behind the gallery, the city's grime a welcome relief from the sterile white walls. It was a video call from Jessica and a man I now knew well. Marcus Vance, the Oscar-winning director, tapped to helm the Ethereum movie. "Uno." Marcus's face filled the screen, his expression intense and passionate. "We have a problem with the design for the Shadow Cruiser." The concept artist gave me something that looks like a space bat. I told him, "No, the Shadow Cruiser is a blade, a whisper of death in the void, not a flying rodent. I need your input." I leaned against the brick wall, the contrast between my two worlds so sharp it gave me vertigo. Inside, my family was betting their home on a shopping cart sculpture. Out here, a legendary director was asking for my opinion on the design of a fictional starship. "It should be obsidian, Marcus," I said, slipping into my Uno persona. "No lights except for the engine's faint blue-white trail. It shouldn't announce its presence. It should just arrive like a bad memory." Marcus's eyes lit up. "Yes, a bad memory, that's it. Jess, are you writing this down? A blade, a whisper, a bad memory. Uno, you're a genius." The praise felt warm and real, a stark contrast to my mother's gentle pity. This was my world. A world built on imagination and hard work, a world where my vision was not only seen but celebrated. The opening night of the exhibition arrived. My mother wore her best dress. My father wore a suit that was now too big for him. Leo stood in the center of the gallery, a permanent artist's scowl fixed on his face, trying to look profound. A small crowd of my parents' friends and a few curious art students milled about, sipping cheap Chardonnay and trying to find polite things to say. "It's very metallic," I heard one woman whisper to her husband. Then Genevieve Croft arrived. She was a tiny woman in a severe black dress, her sharp eyes missing nothing. She swept through the room like a hawk, ignoring Damien's fawning and Leo's attempts to explain his process. She spent exactly 10 minutes in the gallery, her gaze lingering on each sculpture for a few seconds before moving on. Then, without a word to anyone, she left. A nervous silence fell over the room. "Well, that's a good sign," my mother said, her voice a little too loud. She was so captivated she was speechless. The review was published online the next morning. Jessica sent me the link with a simple message. "Ouch!" The headline was brutal. "A tantrum in metal, Leo Flores' vision is a monument to unearned confidence." Genevieve hadn't just disliked the art, she had disemboweled it. She called it derivative, hollow, and the desperate cry of a young man who has been told he is a genius so many times, he has mistaken the sound of his own echo for applause. She saved the most cutting remark for last. "The tragedy of this exhibition is not the art itself. but the clear and painful evidence of a family's love being weaponized into a tool of profound delusion. One can only hope they have good insurance. I read it in the quiet of my small apartment. It was cruel, yes, but it was also true. Every word was a perfectly aimed dart, bursting the fragile bubble my family had lived in for years. The phone calls started an hour later. First, my mother, sobbing hysterically. How could she? She doesn't understand. She's a bitter, cruel woman. Then my father, his voice tight with panic. The gallery called. No sales, not one. Damien said the review has made the entire collection toxic. He wants us to remove the sculptures by tomorrow. We have to pay for the truck again, Maya. The worst call was from Leo. He wasn't sad, he was furious. It's a conspiracy, he yelled into the phone. The art world is afraid of me. They're trying to silence me. They can't handle my truth. I stayed silent, letting him rage. What are you thinking, Maya? Why are you so quiet? He suddenly demanded. I'm sorry this happened, Leo. Sorry, don't patronize me. You're probably happy, aren't you? Tucked away in your little kiddie classroom. What would you know about real art? About sacrifice? You've never taken a real risk in your life? The line went dead. I held the phone in my hand, his words ringing in my ears. You've never taken a real risk in your life. The irony was a physical ache in my chest. I had risked everything, my privacy, my sanity, my identity, to build my world. A world he couldn't even begin to imagine. 2 weeks later, the first letter arrived. It was from a company called Sterling Financial Group. It was printed on thick, expensive paper, the kind of paper that delivers bad news with cold, corporate politeness. It was a formal notice. Due to the failure to make the first payment on their second mortgage, my parents' account was now in arrears. It mentioned clauses, penalties, and interest rates that made my stomach clench. This was it. The abstract fear had become a concrete threat, printed in black ink. The clock was ticking. I folded the letter and put it in my desk drawer. It felt like holding a time bomb. My family had no idea that Sterling Financial, a subsidiary of a larger private equity firm, had recently been acquired in a quiet, unpublicized deal. Acquired by Titan Forge Media, my studio, my partner, and through a complex series of clauses in my contract, I, Uno, had a significant, controlling interest in their financial acquisitions division. They thought they were in debt to a bank. They had no idea they were in debt to me. The letter from Sterling Financial acted like a slow-acting poison, seeping into the foundations of my family's life. The forced optimism of the exhibition's opening night curdled into a thick, pervasive anxiety. My mother stopped singing in the kitchen. My father started working weekends at a friend's hardware store, the extra cash a pitifully small bandage on a gaping wound. They didn't tell me about the job, but I saw the paint stains and exhaustion on his hands when I visited on a Sunday. Leo, however, remained insulated in his cocoon of righteous anger. He saw the family's financial strain not as a consequence of his failure, but as another layer of the art world's conspiracy against him. This is what it means to be a true artist, Maya, he told me one evening as he watched me clear the dinner table. He hadn't lifted a finger to help. Suffering. The world is never ready for the vanguard. Van Gogh never sold a painting in his lifetime. Van Gogh also died in poverty, Leo, I said, my voice sharper than I intended. My mother overheard from the kitchen. Maya, that's not a nice thing to say. Your brother is going through a difficult time. We must support him. We are bleeding for him, I wanted to scream. We are losing everything. But I just stacked the plates and said nothing. My life as Uno was accelerating at a dizzying pace. Titan Forge flew me out to their Burbank studios for the big production meeting. A black town car picked me up from my tiny apartment, a detail that was almost comically absurd. I told my parents I was attending a teachers' conference in a different part of the state. The studio was a city unto itself. I walked through sound stages and past offices where famous faces I'd only seen on screen were laughing over coffee. I was introduced not as Maya, but as Uno. The name was spoken with a reverence that was both thrilling and terrifying. I wore a simple black pantsuit, my hair pulled back, and a pair of non-prescription glasses, a flimsy disguise, but it made me feel like I was putting on a uniform, stepping into a role. The meeting was held in a massive boardroom with a view that stretched all the way to the Hollywood sign. Marcus Vance was there, along with the producers, the lead writer, the production designer, and a man named Alastair Finch. Finch was the CEO of Titan Forge Media. He was sharp, impeccably dressed, and radiated an aura of calm, absolute power. Uno, he said, shaking my hand firmly, it's a genuine honor. Ethereum is not just a story, it's a mythology, and we are going to treat it as such. For 2 hours, they walked me through their vision. They showed me stunning concept art for worlds I had only seen in my head. They discussed casting choices, debating A-list actors to play characters I had doodled in a sketchbook during boring college lectures. It was surreal. At one point, Marcus and the production designer got into a heated debate about the precise crystalline structure of the capital city on Xylos. "Uno is the final word," Marcus declared, turning to me. "What do you see?" I took a deep breath. "It's not crystal," I said, my voice steady. "It's biomechanical. The city is alive. It grows. The buildings are like coral, pulsating with a soft, internal light." The room went silent. Then the production designer slowly started to smile. "Of course," he whispered, "it's alive." Alastair Finch watched me, a thoughtful expression on his face. He saw me, in a way my own family never had. He saw a creator, a world builder. At the end of the meeting, Alastair asked to speak with me alone. "Your contract gives you a great deal of creative control," he said, once everyone else had left. "It also gives you a significant stake in our subsidiary ventures, including our financial holdings. That's unusual for a creative partner." "I don't just want to build worlds," I told him, meeting his gaze directly. "I want to build a foundation, something that lasts." "I respect that," he said. He slid a thin file across the polished table. "Speaking of which, our acquisitions department flagged this. A small-scale residential mortgage from a new holding, Sterling Financial. The name on the account is Flores. Any relation?" His tone was casual, but his eyes were sharp. My heart hammered in my chest. "They're my parents," he nodded slowly. "I see. The account is delinquent. Foreclosure proceedings will begin automatically in 60 days if the situation isn't rectified. It's a minor asset, easily lost in the shuffle, but I thought you should know." "Thank you, Alastair." "Maya," he said, using my real name for the first time. "Titan Forge values its partners. And we protect our assets. Ethereum is now our most valuable IP, which makes you our most valuable partner. If you need the corporation's resources to handle a private matter, you have them. Just say the word." The offer hung in the air, a promise of immense power. I could make one phone call, and the debt would vanish. My parents' house would be safe. But what would that solve? It would only reinforce their belief that they could be reckless without consequence. It would prove to Leo that he could fail upwards forever, always cushioned by a safety net he didn't even know existed. I flew back to my reality. The next day, I was back in the classroom, helping little Lily with her clay penguin. The contrast gave me a headache. That weekend, the second letter from Sterling Financial arrived. This one was more aggressive. The words "Notice of Intent to Foreclose" were in bold red letters. I found it in the mail before my parents did. I walked into the house to find a strained, artificial cheerfulness. My mother was baking. She only ever stress-baked. The air was thick with the scent of cinnamon and quiet desperation. "My Amija, I was just thinking about you," she said, pulling a tray of cookies from the oven. "Mom, we need to talk," I said, holding up the envelope. The fake smile vanished from her face. My father walked in from the backyard, his shoulders slumped. He saw the letter in my hand and his face went gray. "Where did you get that?" he asked, his voice rough. "It was in the mail. This is the second one, isn't it?" My mother started to cry, silent tears rolling down her cheeks. "We were going to tell you," she whispered. We didn't want to worry you." "Worry me? Mom, they're threatening to take the house." My voice was rising, filled with a frustration I could no longer contain. "The house I grew up in, you bet it on a pile of scrap metal. Don't you talk about your brother's art that way." She snapped, her grief turning to anger. "What art? The art that nobody wants. The art that's currently sitting in our garage because the gallery threw it out. What was the plan, Mom? What was the actual plan?" Leo chose that moment to emerge from his bedroom, drawn by the raised voices. He looked rumpled, having just woken up at 2 in the afternoon. "What's going on?" he asked, yawning. I turned on him, the full force of my long-suppressed anger finally breaking free. "What's going on, Leo, is that Mom and Dad are about to lose their home. Our home, because of you." He actually looked confused. "What does this have to do with me?" The sheer, unadulterated selfishness of the question stunned me into silence. My father spoke, his voice heavy with defeat. "The bank, the loan for the exhibition, we can't make the payments, son." Leo's eyes widened, not with guilt, but with indignation. "So, you're blaming me? I'm the victim here. My career was sabotaged." "You're the ones who are supposed to support me, to believe in me." "Believe in you?" I finally found my voice, and it was shaking with rage. "We have given you everything. Mom and Dad have sacrificed everything for your vision. And what have you given back? Nothing. You live here rent-free, eating their food, using their money, and you haven't shown an ounce of gratitude or responsibility. You are not a victim, Leo. You are a black hole." "Maya," my mother cried out, scandalized. No, Mom, I said, turning back to her. No more pretending. Look at Dad, he's working 2 jobs, you're so stressed you can't sleep. And I pointed at Leo, he sleeps until noon and talks about Van Gogh. This isn't support, this is enabling, and it has to stop. I walked out, leaving a stunned, shattered silence behind me. I drove to the beach and watched the waves crash against the shore, each one a mirror of the anger and sorrow churning inside me. The sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple, a sky worthy of a panel in Ethereum. I took out my phone, not to call Jessica or Alistair, but to send an email to a specific address I had been given, a contact in Titan Forge's legal department. The subject line was simple: Flores account Sterling Financial. The body of the email was just one sentence. Begin standard foreclosure proceedings as scheduled. No special treatment. I hit send. The wave of power it gave me was terrifying. It was the power to destroy, but I knew, deep down, it was also the only power that could save them. They needed to hit rock bottom, and I was the only one with the strength to kick the floor out from under them. The email felt like pulling a pin from a grenade. For the next few weeks, I waited for the explosion. Life settled into a tense, fragile routine. My parents didn't speak of the foreclosure notice again, treating it like a terminal diagnosis they had decided to ignore. My mother filled the house with the aromas of ever more elaborate baked goods. My father seemed to age a decade, the silence between him and my mother stretching thin and brittle. Lee reacted to the confrontation not with introspection, but by retreating further into his narrative of artistic martyrdom. He spent his days in the garage, making a terrible racket, banging and welding. He called his new project Phoenix from the Ashes, a title so lacking in self-awareness it would have been funny if the circumstances weren't so dire. I kept my distance, retreating into the world of Uno. It was my sanctuary. I had daily video calls with the Ethereum production team. I approved casting choices, fine-tuned the script, and sketched new designs for alien technology that made the production designer weep with joy. I was decisive, respected, and in control. Then I would log off, look around my tiny, cluttered apartment, and feel the crushing weight of my other life. One evening, my Aunt Sophia called me. I went to see your parents, she said, her voice devoid of its usual sharp humor. Elena tried to give me a lemon meringue pie. I told her I didn't want her pie, I wanted the truth. They finally showed me the letters, Maya. I closed my eyes, bracing myself. They're drowning, she said softly. They have no savings left. Your father's credit cards are maxed out. They have 45 days until the bank auctions the house. They don't have a plan, they're just waiting, as if a miracle is going to happen. A miracle named Leo, I said bitterly. He's not a miracle, he's an anchor, she shot back. Listen to me, Maya, you work hard, you're responsible, but you don't make enough to fix this. I've run the numbers. They need at least $50,000 just to stop the foreclosure, and that doesn't even touch the underlying debt. It's a disaster. I know, Aunt Sophia. What I don't understand is this Sterling Financial, she continued, her accountant's brain kicking in. They're aggressive. I've never seen a lender move this fast. It's almost predatory. You have no idea, I thought. The proceedings were standard, but standard for a multi-billion-dollar corporation's financial arm was ruthless efficiency. I had set a machine in motion, and it would not stop. A few days later, a man in a suit came to the house. I was there, dropping off groceries I knew my parents couldn't afford. The man was a property appraiser. He walked around the outside of the house, taking notes on a clipboard, his presence a clinical, terrifying omen. My mother watched him from the living room window, her hand pressed against her mouth. Who is that? She whispered, though she knew. He's from the bank, Elena, my father said, his voice flat. He looked utterly broken. The sight of their fear, so raw and real, was a physical blow. This was what I wanted, wasn't it, for them to understand the consequences? But watching it unfold felt less like justice and more like cruelty. For a fleeting moment, I wanted to call Alistair, to stop it all. But then I looked over at the garage, where Leo was still making a racket, oblivious, and my resolve hardened. The final notice arrived a week later. It wasn't a letter. It was a thick packet of legal documents delivered by a courier. The auction date was set. The 15th of next month. They had 3 weeks. That night, my parents and Aunt Sophia came to my apartment. It was the first time they had ever visited. They looked around the small space, at the second-hand furniture and the piles of art books, and I could see the pity in their eyes. They were about to lose their home, and they still felt sorry for me. My father held the legal packet in his hands. He couldn't even look at me. Maya, he began, his voice cracking. We "We need your help, we don't know who else to turn to." My mother was openly weeping now. "Anything you have, Mija, any savings, we'll pay you back, I swear, as soon as Leo sells his new piece." The mention of Leo, even now, sent a jolt of anger through me. I took a deep breath, steeling myself for what I had to do. "How much have you given Leo over the years?" I asked, my voice quiet. The question caught them off guard. "What?" my father asked. "The art supplies, the studio in the garage, the entry fees for competitions, the wine he drinks. How much?" "That's not important right now," my mother said dismissively. "It is the only thing that's important," I countered. "You're asking me for my savings. I need to know what happened to yours." Aunt Sophia, ever the accountant, had the answer. I checked their statements. Over the last 5 years, conservatively, they have spent over $100,000 on Leo's career. The number hung in the air, obscene and horrifying. My parents flinched, as if they had never dared to calculate it themselves. "It was an investment in his future," my mother whispered, a desperate, rote defense. "No, Mom," I said, my voice hardening. "It was a sacrifice. And the person you sacrificed for didn't even notice. Where is he now? Why isn't he here, begging with you?" "We didn't want to upset him," my father mumbled. "He needs to focus on his work." I felt a hysterical laugh bubble up inside me. I choked it down. I walked over to my desk, opened a drawer, and pulled out my bank book. I had kept the account for my teaching salary separate, a part of my cover. I opened it and showed it to them. The balance was $3,450, my life savings. "This is it," I said. "This is everything I have. After I pay my rent and my car insurance, I have this. It won't even cover the late fees on your loan." My mother stared at the number, her expression a mixture of shock and profound disappointment. In that moment, I knew she had truly believed I had a secret stash somewhere, that her responsible, quiet daughter would be able to magically fix the mess her brilliant son had made. The reality, that I was just as poor as they thought I was her final, crushing blow. "See," she said, her voice turning cold. "So you won't help us?" "I can't," I said, the lie tasting like poison. "This is all I have." My father finally looked at me, his eyes filled with a weary anger. "We raised you, we fed you, and now when we need you, this is your answer, a few $1,000s and a lecture? I'm not the one who took out a loan you couldn't afford." I shot back, my own control finally snapping. "I'm not the one who ignored the warning letters. You made these choices, you and Mom. You chose to pour every last cent into Leo's fantasy, and you left nothing for a crisis. These are your consequences." He stood up, his face grim. "If that's how you feel, then there's nothing more to say. Come on, Alina." They left without another word. Aunt Sophia lingered for a moment. "That was the hardest thing you've ever had to do, wasn't it?" she asked softly. I could only nod, tears finally blurring my vision. "They won't see it now," she said, squeezing my shoulder. "But you're doing the right thing, Maya. They needed this wake-up call. I just hope they answer it before it's too late." After she left, I sat in the silence of my apartment, the small bank book still open on the table. It was a symbol of my double life. In one world, that number was a pathetic failure. In the other, it was a rounding error. I had the power to save them with the stroke of a pen, but I had chosen to let them believe in the lie of my poverty. Because sometimes the only way to save people is to let them believe they are well and truly alone. The real lesson wasn't about money, it was about what they valued. And for years, they had valued the wrong thing. Now, the bill was coming due. The 3 weeks leading up to the auction were the longest of my life. The silence from my family was absolute. No calls, no texts. It was as if by refusing my meager help, they had excommunicated me. Aunt Sophia served as my reluctant informant. "It's bad, Maya," she told me over the phone one night. Her voice was strained. "Your mother is trying to sell her jewelry. Your father tried to get a consolidation loan from the credit union, but they laughed him out of the office. Their credit is shot." "And Leo?" I asked, my voice flat. "Leo is Leo," she sighed. "He's trying to sell his Phoenix from the Ashes piece online. He listed it for $75,000. He's calling it a protest against the commercialization of suffering. The only offer he's gotten is from a scrap metal dealer for $200. The news brought me no satisfaction, only a deep, weary sadness. This was the bottom. This was the cold, hard reality I had wanted them to face. Meanwhile, my world as Uno was becoming increasingly tangible and demanding. Titan Forge had officially greenlit pre-production. A press release announced the Ethereum movie, and the internet exploded. My webtoon, which I still drew every night as a form of therapy, saw its readership numbers spike into the stratosphere. I was an anonymous global phenomenon. Alistair Finch summoned me for another meeting. This time, it wasn't about creative direction. "The auction for your parents' property is in 10 days, he said, getting straight to the point. He gestured to a screen on his wall, which showed a picture of my childhood home, complete with my mother's prize-winning rose bushes. It was now just another asset in a portfolio, designated by a reference number. I know, I said. Sterling Financial, under our directive, will be the primary bidder, he continued. We will acquire the property, standard procedure. Once that's done, we can discuss the next steps. We can arrange a lease-back agreement or transfer the title to a trust under your control. It will be clean, your family will never know. His efficiency was chilling. He offered a neat, corporate solution to a messy human problem. I could save the house, and my secret would remain safe. I could be their anonymous guardian angel. But the thought left a sour taste in my mouth. It was another rescue, another way for them to avoid the fundamental lesson they needed to learn. No, I said. Alastair raised an eyebrow. No. Let the auction proceed. Let another buyer get it if they bid high enough. But if Sterling acquires it, I don't want to hide. I want to be the one who evicts them. The words hung in the air. Alastair stared at me, his calm facade finally cracking into a look of genuine surprise. That's a cold play, Maya. It's not about being cold, I explained, my voice low but firm. It's about clarity. For years, I've been invisible to them. They see me as the daughter who needs protecting, the one who failed to launch. My brother is the artist, the visionary, the one worth sacrificing everything for. They need to see the truth. Not just that they were wrong about him, but that they were wrong about me. He studied me for a long moment. This is personal, not business. My whole life's work is personal, I replied. You bought into Ethereum because it was a story about outcasts finding their power. This is just another chapter of that story. He leaned back in his chair and a slow smile spread across his face. All right, Uno, we'll play it your way. Let me know what you need. The day of the auction, I didn't go to the courthouse. I went to my little art studio. I couldn't bear to be there to watch my home be sold off like a piece of used furniture. Instead, I taught my class. I helped Lily paint a family of lions, each one with a sparkly, glitter-glue mane. Her uncomplicated joy was the only thing that kept me sane. At noon, my phone buzzed. It was a text from Alastair. Asset acquired. Sterling Financial is now the legal owner of 45 Orchard Lane. Your move. I felt a hollow victory. I had the power. I had the house, and I had a family that now hated me. That evening, I drove to the house. The lights were on. I could see the silhouettes of my parents moving inside. I took a deep breath and walked up the familiar path, my heart pounding with a mixture of dread and resolve. I rang the doorbell. My father answered. When he saw me, his face hardened into a mask of stone. What do you want? He asked, his voice rough with unshed tears. I heard what happened, I said softly. I came to see if you were okay. Okay, my mother cried, appearing behind him. Her eyes were red and swollen. Our house was just sold, Maya. We have 30 days to get out. We're homeless. How could we possibly be okay? And it's all your fault. My fault? I asked, stunned. Yes, yours, she accused, her voice rising with hysteria. If you had just helped us, if you had given us what you had, we could have done something, but you were selfish. You stood by and watched us drown. The injustice of it was so profound, so twisted, that all my carefully constructed plans, all my thoughts of cold clarity and tough love evaporated. All that was left was the raw, bleeding wound of a daughter who had never been enough. I offered you everything I had, I said, my voice trembling. A pathetic $3,000, she spat. That was nothing. Leo appeared in the hallway behind them. I told you she was useless, he said with a sneer. She's always been jealous of me. She wanted this to happen. That was it. The final straw. The rage I felt was so pure and white-hot, it burned away all my grief. I looked at the three of them, my broken father, my hysterical mother, my smug, useless brother, and I stopped seeing my family. I saw strangers who had taken my love and my quiet support for granted my entire life. I took a step back from the door. My voice, when I spoke, was devoid of all emotion. It was the voice of a CEO, not a daughter. The voice of Uno. You have 30 days to vacate the premises, I said. They stared at me confused. What are you talking about? My father asked. The house, I said, my voice as cold and clear as ice. The new owner is very particular. They want the property empty in 30 days. I just met with their representative. You met with them? My mother asked, a flicker of hope in her eyes. Can you talk to them, plead with them? There's no need for pleading, I said. I reached into my purse and pulled out a business card. It was Alastair's, but on the back I had written a name and a number. The new owner has already made arrangements for your son. They've found him a job. Leo laughed. A job? I'm an artist. I don't need a job. You do now, I said. I handed the card to my father. It's a position as an assistant in a production design workshop. For a movie, it's manual labor. sweeping floors, mixing paint, moving sets. It pays minimum wage. If he takes it and keeps it, the new owner might be willing to discuss a rental agreement for the house. A month-to-month lease, with the rent paid on time every time from his salary. My father stared at the card. What movie? I looked directly at Leo, a cold smile touching my lips for the first time. It's called Ethereum. The silence that followed was absolute. Leo's smug expression dissolved into disbelief. My parents looked back and forth between us, the gears of a terrible new understanding beginning to turn in their minds. They didn't know the whole truth, not yet. But they knew, with sickening certainty, that the invisible, useless daughter they had dismissed their entire lives had just walked back into their home holding all the strings. The puppet master had finally revealed herself. The revelation landed in the room not like a bomb, but like a slow-motion shockwave, buckling the foundations of their reality. Leo was the first to find his voice, a choked, incredulous whisper. Ethereum, the webtoon, that's just some stupid comic for kids. That stupid comic for kids is now a $150 million feature film, I said, my voice still unnervingly calm. And the studio that's making it, Titan Forge Media, is the parent company of Sterling Financial, the bank that just bought your house. My mother sank onto the stairs, her face ashen. My father continued to stare at me, his expression a maelstrom of confusion, denial, and a dawning, horrified respect. How do you know all this, Maya? He asked, his voice barely audible. Because the studio likes to keep its most valuable assets happy, I said, letting the cryptic statement hang in the air. They heard about my family's situation. They saw it as an opportunity. They need grunts in the workshop. Leo needs a job, it's synergy. I'm not going to be a grunt. Leo exploded, his face turning a blotchy red. I am a fine artist, I will not sweep floors. Then you will be homeless, I stated without a trace of pity. Your choice, the offer is on the table for exactly 1 week. After that, the eviction proceeds and the job offer is rescinded. The new owner is not sentimental. I turned to leave. I had delivered the message. The first phase of my plan was complete. Maya, wait, my mother called out, her voice thin and reedy. Who is this new owner? Why are they doing this? Why are they helping us like this? I paused at the door and looked back at them. They're not helping you, I said. They're investing in me, and they're tired of seeing their investment distracted by your poor decisions. They see your son not as a genius, but as a liability, a bad asset that needs to be managed. This isn't a rescue, Mom. It's a corporate restructuring of the Flores family. I walked away, and for the first time in my life, I didn't look back. The next few days were a war of attrition, fought via tense, sporadic phone calls from Aunt Sophia. Leo was apparently having a complete meltdown, alternating between furious tirades about his artistic integrity and pathetic bouts of despair. My parents were in a state of shock, unable to process the new power dynamic. The daughter they had pitied was now the gatekeeper to their salvation, and the terms were brutally simple. Leo had to work. He's refusing to even consider it, Sophia told me, sounding exhausted. He keeps saying it's a trap, a way to humiliate him. Elena is a wreck. She thinks this mysterious owner is some kind of monster. Ricardo, I don't know what he thinks. He's just quiet. He sits in his armchair for hours, just staring at the wall. Give it time, I said. Reality is a bitter pill to swallow. 4 days before the deadline, Leo called me. His voice was stripped of all its usual arrogance. Is this real? He asked without any preamble. This job? It's real. Report to the Burbank studio lot, gate 3 at 7 a.m. on Monday. Ask for a man named Sal. He'll be your supervisor. Why are you doing this, Maya? He asked, and for the first time I heard a genuine note of confusion in his voice, not just entitlement. Are you trying to destroy me? No, Leo, I said, and I was surprised by the sincerity in my own voice. I'm trying to introduce you to the man you could have been if you'd ever had to earn anything in your life. 7 a.m., don't be late. Sal hates people who are late. He showed up. Aunt Sophia called me at 7:15 on Monday morning to confirm it. He had taken the bus, because my father, in a rare act of tough love, had refused to give him gas money. Leo's first week was, by all accounts, hell. Sal, the workshop foreman, was a grizzled veteran of the movie industry who had no time for artistic temperaments. I had given him a simple instruction: treat him like any other new hire. No special treatment. Sal took that to heart. Leo swept acres of sawdust. He hauled heavy plaster molds until his arms shook. He learned how to mix gallons of paint to the exact color specifications for the hull of a Xylosian starfighter. He came home each night covered in grime, too tired to even complain. At the end of the first week, a paycheck for $412.38 was direct deposited into his bank account. It was the first real money he had ever earned. I honored my end of the bargain. I had a formal lease agreement drawn up. The rent was set at 80% of Leo's monthly take-home pay. It was steep, but manageable if they were careful. The landlord was listed as Orchard Lane Properties, LLC, a shell corporation so anonymous it was practically invisible. I went to the house on a Sunday to have my parents sign the papers. The atmosphere was different. The oppressive cloud of panic had been replaced by a tense, uncertain calm. Leo was there, sitting at the kitchen table. His hands, which he had always kept pristine for his art, were now calloused and stained with paint. He looked exhausted, but he also looked clearer. The petulant entitlement in his eyes had been replaced by a weary pragmatism. My father read every line of the lease agreement. My mother just stared at the signature line. "So, we're renters now," she said, her voice flat, "in our own home." "Yes," I said, "you are." She picked up the pen. "And if Leo quits his job, then you have 30 days to find a new place to live," I replied. She signed. My father signed after her. The house was still theirs to live in, but it was no longer their safety net. It was a responsibility, one that was now tied directly to their son's willingness to work. As I was packing up the papers, my mother stopped me. "This company, Titan Forge," she said. "Why are they so invested in you, Maya? What is your relationship with them?" It was time, not for the whole truth, but for the first real piece of it. "I'm not just a teacher, Mom," I said softly. I reached into my bag and pulled out a large, glossy art book. It was a pre-release Art of Ethereum book that the studio had sent me. I opened it to the title page. There, under the magnificent, sprawling image of the Zalosian capital, were the words, "CREATDBY Uno." I tapped the name. "That's me," I said. "I'm Uno." I let them absorb it. I watched their faces as a lifetime of assumptions crumbled to dust. My mother's hand flew to her mouth. My father sank into a chair, his face a mask of utter shock. Leo just stared at the book, then at me, then back at the book. He recognized the art style. He had seen me doodling in that exact style for years, dismissing it as my little hobby. You drew this?" Leo whispered, tracing the lines of a starship with a trembling finger. "All of it?" "All of it," I confirmed. "Every character, every world, every line of dialogue for the past 6 years. While you were in the garage talking about the void, I was in my apartment building a universe." The silence in the room was deafening. It was the sound of a world being remade. The invisible daughter, the failed artist, was the secret architect of the thing that was now, ironically, keeping a roof over their heads. The stupid comic for kids was the foundation of their new reality. My father finally looked up at me, his eyes shining with a complex mix of awe, shame, and a pride I had never seen from him before. "Why, Maya?" he asked, his voice thick with emotion. "Why didn't you ever tell us?" "Because," I said, the truth finally coming out, raw and painful. "You were all too busy looking at Leo to ever really see me." The confession changed everything and nothing. The house was safe for now, but the emotional architecture of our family had been demolished. We had to rebuild from the rubble, and no one knew where to begin. My parents looked at me with a new, hesitant awe, as if I were a stranger they had been living with for 28 years. They were proud, yes, but their pride was laced with a profound and painful shame. They had bet on the wrong horse, and the one they'd ignored had secretly won the Triple Crown. Leo underwent the most dramatic transformation. The revelation that his useless sister was the creator of the very project he was now toiling on as a lowly assistant shattered his ego in a way Genevieve Croft's review never could. He stopped talking about artistic martyrdom. He just went to work every day, came home, and kept to himself. The fury was gone, replaced by a quiet, bewildered humility. I gave them space. I didn't visit for a few weeks, letting the truth settle. My relationship with Alistair and the studio, however, deepened. He had seen my strategy play out and was impressed. "You didn't just solve a financial problem, Maya," he told me during a call. "You engineered a paradigm shift. You should have gone into corporate rating." "I prefer world building," I told him. "The principles are surprisingly similar." The movie production was now in full swing. One day, Marcus Vance, the director, called me in a panic. "Uno, we're in the workshop and the set for the Emperor's throne room feels wrong. The colors are off. It's not imposing enough. I need your eyes on it. Can you come down to the lot?" I agreed. When I arrived at the massive soundstage, I was met with a scene of controlled chaos. Dozens of crew members were at work. And there, in the center of it all, was the half-constructed throne set. And standing on a ladder, carefully applying a base coat of metallic gray paint to a massive pillar, was my brother. He saw me at the same time I saw him. He froze, paintbrush in hand. Sal, the foreman, came over to greet me. "Uno, good to have you here. This thing's been fighting us all week." Leo slowly climbed down the ladder, his face a mixture of awe and apprehension. He wiped his hands on his paint-splattered jeans. The other crew members, seeing their boss treat me with such reverence, were staring. "It's the gray," I said to Sal, ignoring Leo for a moment. "It's too flat." The Emperor's power isn't just brutal, it's ancient. The metal should have an undercoat of tarnished bronze, with the gray layered on top and then partially distressed, so it looks like it's been repainted over centuries of conquest. Sal's eyes lit up. "Of course, layers, history, I get it. Leo," he yelled. "You heard the boss, mix up a batch of bronze. Let's get a test patch done." Leo just nodded, not looking at me, and walked over to the paint station. He was no longer Leo Flores, the visionary. He was a guy with a job to do, and the person who had just given the order was his sister. I stayed for an hour, consulting with Marcus and the design team. As I was leaving, Leo was waiting for me by the soundstage door. "The throne room," he said, his voice quiet. "The layers, the history. That was a good idea, a really good idea." "Thanks," I said. "I read it," he continued, finally meeting my eyes. "All of it, 6 years' worth." I stayed up for 3 nights and read the entire Ethereum series. It's incredible, Maya. The worlds, the characters, it's what I always talked about doing. But you actually did it. It wasn't an apology, not in words, but it was something more valuable. It was an admission, it was respect. "You just had to get your hands dirty, Leo," I said. "That's all." A year later, I sat in a darkened theater for the world premiere of Ethereum. I wasn't in the front row with the stars. I sat in the middle of the theater, tucked between Aunt Sophia and Jessica. A few rows behind me sat my parents and Leo. The movie was a triumph. The worlds I had imagined came to life with breathtaking beauty and terrifying grandeur. When the credits rolled and the words based on the webtoon series created by Uno appeared on the screen, a cheer went up in the theater. My mother squeezed my father's hand, and I saw tears in both their eyes. After the premiere at the lavish afterparty, my father came up to me holding 2 glasses of champagne. "I don't think I ever told you," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "But I saved all of your drawings from when you were a little girl. The purple giraffes, the rocket ships, all of them. I kept them in a box in the garage." "I remember," I said. "I knew," he said, his voice cracking. "Deep down, I think I always knew, but I was a fool. I was so caught up in the noise, in what I thought success was supposed to look like, that I didn't listen to the quiet. I am so sorry, Maya, and so incredibly proud." We didn't sell the house. I had Orchard Lane Properties, LLC, sign the title over to my parents, the deed paid in full. There was one condition. The garage was no longer Leo's studio. It was now my mother's pottery workshop, a passion she had given up 30 years earlier to raise a family. My father built her a kiln with his own hands. Leo never went back to sculpting. He stayed on at the studio. He had found his place, not as a visionary, but as a craftsman. He had a talent for building things, for making imaginary worlds real. He was proud of his work. He was part of a team. He was finally happy. Sometimes, when people ask me for advice, young artists and writers who feel invisible and overlooked, I don't tell them to shout louder. I tell them the story of my 2 lives. I tell them to build their world in secret, to focus on the work, not the applause. The applause is fickle. The work is real. True value isn't created by the people who believe in you. It's forged in the quiet, lonely hours when you are the only one who believes in yourself. My name is Maya Flores. For a long time, I lived in the shadow of a story someone else had written for me. Now, I am the one who writes the stories. I am the author of my own universe. And my message to anyone who has ever felt unseen is simple. Let them underestimate you. Let them look right past you. While they're busy watching for fireworks, you can be in the basement, quietly, patiently, building a star. And when your time comes, you won't need their permission to shine. You will light up the entire sky.